Welcome to this SPHN training session that will touch on the Maelstrom Metadata Catalog as an instrument to improve Swiss cohort findability. My name is Armida, Scientific Coordinator at the Personalized Health Group, and I will guide you through this presentation. But without further ado, let's begin with a short agenda. This presentation will be divided in two main parts. First, I will give you a quick introduction to the motivation that led to the adoption of Maelstrom as a metadata catalog for Swiss cohorts, and successively, I will guide you through the catalog itself, showcasing its core functionalities. But let's begin with why a metadata catalog for cohorts is useful and in line with SPHN endeavors. As you may know, Switzerland houses many cohort studies within its institution. These studies are renowned not only for their broad spectrum of research topics, but also for the high quality of the data collected. On the downside, Swiss cohorts are for the most part independent entities that suffer from a lack of visibility. Indeed, the simple fact of finding a cohort study about a particular subject can be rather challenging. Let's imagine a researcher that is interested in a particular set of data. Naturally, cohort data is described by its metadata, and as a researcher, the only way to know if the cohort collected the data you are interested in is to access this metadata and verify one cohort at a time. On top of that, cohort metadata are not always publicly available and require to directly contact the studies in order to know if a particular variable or set of variables is collected. To address this limitation, SPHN, in collaboration with its task force, explored the idea of a unique metadata catalog gathering the metadata for all cohorts willing to be part of it. With this solution, the metadata from the cohorts are pushed into a single unique repository, while the data itself remains within the different cohorts. The researcher is now able to query the catalog and simply retrieve all the information needed without further loss of time and effort. The cohort, on the other hand, will benefit from an increased visibility. Of course, the choice of the right catalog is of the utmost importance. After an evaluation process, the choice fell upon the international catalog developed by Maelstrom Research. Indeed, the catalog is renowned by hosting several internationally relevant cohorts, as for example the Swedish Cohort Consortium, and for its deep granularity. In brief, Maelstrom Catalog is based in two pieces of software: Opal, a data management and harmonization tool, and Mica, a metadata catalog and discovery tool. On the top of that sits a metadata model that allows to describe the cohort study down to the variable level, and with a refined classification scheme that helps to annotate each variable of the cohort. But now, let's dive into the Maelstrom catalog and its functionalities. To reach the metadata catalog, it is sufficient to type maelstromresearch.org on your favorite browser. Here, you will land on the homepage of Maelstrom Research. You will notice that the catalog is directly available on the top right section of the window. Scrolling down, the catalog summary statistics are presented to the user. At the time of this recording, 265 studies from all over the world are listed within the catalog, for more than 1 million variables. Clicking on the green button, Maelstrom Catalog, will bring us to the catalog homepage. From the homepage, it is possible to access all existing networks or directly the individual studies. A third category, harmonization projects, will allow to browse studies whose variable underwent an harmonization process. Naturally, it is possible to dive directly into the search engine and look for studies that collect information useful for answering specific research questions, but we will get to that into a moment. For the moment, let's explore the network page. Here, you will find an inventory of research consortia, often gathering studies with a common research interest. It is possible to filter the networks here and, for example, search for the SPHN network. You can see that the SPHN network, or SPHN Cohort Consortium, is composed at the moment by 5 studies, 2 of them with annotated variables, for a total of almost 4,000 variables. If you click on the network, an overview of all studies will appear. This collects all contact persons indicated by the cohorts and various summary statistics like the geographical distribution of the studies, and here obviously only Switzerland is represented, study design, population size, and perhaps more interesting, the type of biosample collected by the cohort. And finally, of course, the distribution of studies by the start year. If you scroll further down, the individual studies are listed with the number of variables mapped using the Maelstrom cataloging system. You can now access all information about a particular study, for example, SKIPOG, and access the complete study description for this particular cohort. If the cohort has annotated variables, a summary will be displayed under the Variable Classification panel. This overview will give you a better idea of the kind of information collected by the study. Naturally, it is possible to explore the metadata of every single variable by choosing one of the cohort datasets. Typically, cohorts divide their dataset into baseline and follow-ups. So, for this example, we will choose follow-up and, at this point, just click on the variables. Here, you will have full access to the variables for the follow-up data collection event of skipOK. In this page, you can search through all the variables collected by the study. For example, as you can see, information about laboratory measures has been collected here. If we select the variable interleukin-10, for example, we can obtain more information about the variable itself, like, for example, the possible value set used for the variable. Here, in the case of interleukin-10, the value will be a number indicating the concentration, so an integer. But for more qualitative variable, a list of possible values can be specified here. But now let's go back to the home page and show an example of a typical usage of the search engine. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a researcher interested in the effect of smoking on cardiorespiratory diseases. In order to find studies gathering the type of information desired, let's click on Search to access the search engine. As you can see at the beginning, all networks, studies, and variables are displayed. At this point, we can start refining our search using the panel on the left. Here, on the first panel, Variable, it is possible to specify areas of information, variable properties, source and target, and scale and measures. Let's start with the first one. If we click on Areas of Information, a large number of selection criteria is displayed. These categories correspond to the selected field used to annotate the variables according to the Maelstrom classification. In our case, we are interested in study collecting socio-demographic characteristics such as age and birth date, or sex and gender. On the panel below, we can select lifestyle and behaviors, so in our case, as intended, it's going to be tobacco. If we look for specific disease, an entire panel will divide different diseases according to their classification. In our case, disease of circulatory system is the choice. We might also be interested in other parameters, like for example, laboratory measures. In this case, we can select hematology or immunology related variables. Naturally, many other characteristics are available, but for the moment, let's stick with these. You might have noticed that while selecting the different parameters, the number of networks and studies reflecting the current selection is automatically updated on the top of the page. On variable properties and source and target, it is possible to search for specific variable in a selection of dataset and define the search of information, for example, a question or biosample. But for the moment, we will not dive into this option. Finally, under Studies, it is possible to refine the search following individual study properties. For example, we might be interested in studies that give access to the biosample or selected blood data source. Once our search parameters are finalized, we can simply click on Display Results on the top right of the page. The first thing you will notice on the result page is an interactive representation of your query. Thanks to this utility, it is possible to directly modify any parameter by simply clicking on the various elements. For example, by clicking on tobacco, we can add other fields of the lifestyle behavior category, and the result will update accordingly. In addition, by selecting Advanced Search, it is possible to modify the logical operator between the elements themselves. On the window below, you will mainly interact with three different tabs. The first one, List, allows you to visualize all network studies or even the variable that match the query. For example, if we click on Studies, you can see the list of all 26 studies matching the query above. The second option, Comparison Table, is an harmonization utility that can be used to directly check the number of variables per each study and divide it by categories. And finally, Summary Statistics, as we've seen before, is a presentation that allows to visualize general information about the results. This window is particularly useful to quickly find information about studies that might satisfy your particular needs. If we go back to Comparison Table and then we click on Studies, we can see that among the 26, only few of them actually collected variable for each one of the categories specified in the query. But, more often than not, we will be interested in studies that satisfy all of our criteria. To do so, we click on Filter on the top left of the page, and then on Full Coverage. Now, only studies that collected variable for each one of the selected fields are displayed. We can see that, in this case, 3 studies are left instead of the initial 26. We have Pivus, Ship, and Skipok. And all of them collect at least one variable assigned to our categories of choice. By clicking on the variables, it is possible to directly check the details of all variables associated to that category. For example, if we click on Skip of 50 tobacco variables, a list of all variables of tobacco is readily available to the researcher. In this case, for example, we can see that skip of tobacco variables are mostly issued from a questionnaire. If now we go back and select Summary Statistics, and we refresh the page, we can see at a glance the origin of the studies, in this case the studies are from Sweden, Germany, and Switzerland, the number of participants, in this case more than 10,000 participants will be potentially available for data retrieval, and the type of biosample available. As specified before, of course, we have blood biosample available, but also other can be available in case. Most lists can be easily downloaded in a CSV format using the download button of the top right of the window. This option will be available every time a list, for example of variable of studies, is presented to the user. At this point, it is up to the researcher to further explore the studies and decide if the information collected could suit their need. In this case, for example, we would notice that the Swedish Pivus studies is only collecting information about subjects aged 70 years. Of course, depending on our needs, this could be clearly a limitation. And with that, I would like to conclude this short demo and invite you to access Maelstrom Catalog by yourself in order to experience firsthand its functionalities. Thank you very much for your attention.